Hi everyone, and welcome to the second session of knowledge management. If you remember, in the first session we ended up with the process definition of knowledge management, and we discussed a whole dynamic system of different processes that need to work together. And we learned that knowledge management is a very crucial element for organizations to succeed. But then the next step is you want to implement these different processes in the organizations. And of course, you go to the operation managers, project managers, HR managers, and you suggest brilliant ideas to them regarding knowledge management. And their answer back is, well, these are all interesting ideas. We know that knowledge needs to be shared, needs to be codified, needs to be organized. However, in order to invest anything in the improvement of knowledge management processes, I'm not the person who can decide. Go and talk to the top management. And of course, when you go to the top management, their answers is, show me the importance of these activities. And in a world that we have scarce resources, I need to make sure that whatever you talk about, whatever you suggest about knowledge management is clearly linked to the strategic priorities of the organization. In a way, I have to justify the strategic role of knowledge management activities. And that's basically the question of this session that we want to discuss. I suggest that you read a little bit beyond the readings and check for the strategic perspectives of knowledge management and see what are the challenges that organizations face in order to bring knowledge management to the strategic level. This has been a major struggle for many organizations, and there are a lot of tools, techniques, and approaches for dealing with this problem. One of these methods that have been very much successfully implemented in a large number of organizations is a methodology called Knowledge Strategy Process, or KSP. The method was actually developed back in 80s in one of the large German companies, Siemens. And at the time, they had exactly this issue that on the ground floor, they felt the need of knowledge management. But at the strategic level, they needed to see the connections. They wanted to see how, if they invest in knowledge management activities, at the end, it supports their strategic goals. A few scholars and management consultants develop this strategy, and you have a book chapter that explains the details of this strategy. So I will not present the details of the strategy. I absolutely recommend you to carefully read the book chapter and check out all the details and the procedures. Just a few highlights about this method. It's a method that is very much systematic. So it's clear where the ideas come from, how they are developed, and at the end they end up in kind of recommendations regarding knowledge management. You can use KSP at different levels for one department, for a unit in the organization, and for an entire organization. Sometimes companies use methods as exactly a tool that they implement this very carefully step by step, and sometimes they use it more as a way of thinking, as a way of thinking strategically about knowledge management. Something important about KSP is that it always tries to make connections with the strategic priorities of the organizations. So if an organization has a clear strategic plan, then KSP can be nicely used and implemented. One of the points that KSP and many other effective knowledge management tools highlight is the fact that knowledge management is not about managing all the knowledge of the organizations. Rather, it's just the management of the important knowledge domains. Organizations may have 100 areas of knowledge already developed in-house, but not all of them are important. And KSP forces us to focus on the important ones. What I would like to go through in the next few slides is not the full version of the KSP. That full version you can see in the book chapter, but it's just a simplified version which has these 5 steps. And I just quickly go through one example and introduce the main concepts and ideas. But again, make sure that you read carefully the book chapter for the further details. KSP starts by asking organizations about their strategic objectives. You go to the website of KLM and you check out the company profile, and there you see the company vision, where you can find what are the strategic objectives of the organization. And imagine that there you get the vision, and then based on that you see a KLM wants to be a leading airline with very clear objectives, having less than 1% of the customers having issues, and if they have any issues, this should be solved within 24 hours. The next step of KSP is basically asking this question: what knowledge areas, what knowledge domains do organizations need? This organization needs to achieve these strategic objectives. And when you ask this question, you need to think about, when we talk about knowledge domains, it's not only about information, it's not only about the areas of, let's say, knowing, it's also about the capabilities of organizations to perform certain tasks. For instance, in this case, you may think about 3 knowledge domains: online security, customer survey, and incident management. Because if you master these 3, you can basically achieve the objectives that you already had. This is just an example. The third step of KSP is prioritizing knowledge domains. Again, the idea is that we don't focus on all knowledge domains, rather we focus on the most important ones. And when we think about the importance of knowledge domains, we can think about short-term importance, let's say within the next year, and we can think about the long-term importance, let's say 3 years. And of course, we can get into 4 different areas of importance. The knowledge domains that are not important, neither in short term nor in long term. Some knowledge domains are called basic. They are important in short term, but in long term, their value shrinks. Some domains called prospective, which means in short term, you may not feel their importance, but as time passes, they become more and more important. And there are critical areas of knowledge that they are important both in short term and long term. One interesting question is this. Of course, if you want to focus on the most important knowledge domains, you go to the critical area. That's easy. A difficult question is, if you have to choose between basic versus prospective knowledge domains, would you go for the basic or you go for prospective knowledge domains? See if you can spot the answer to this question when you read the book chapter and think about different situations. Back to the example we had, we may think about this distribution of the three knowledge domains that we thought about. Again, this is just an example to proceed. And let's then focus on the most important, which is the incident management for the objective of the organization. The next step of KSP is about assessing the knowledge domains. Of course, not all knowledge domains, the most important ones that you want to focus on. And here there are three dimensions we use for assessing the importance of the situation of a knowledge domain. The first one is quality. How good is organization in that knowledge domain? And it can be a whole range from knowing nothing about this knowledge domain to being the leader in the industry on that knowledge domain. The second dimension is about the codification of this knowledge domain. Is this knowledge domain a purely tacit, left side, or to the extreme of explicit? Everything about this knowledge domain is codified. And the third dimension is about the distribution. To what extent this knowledge domain is distributed across the areas, the units, the teams that they need this knowledge domain. And of course, we can go from like the left side, which is just the monopoly, only very few people are located in a specific department, have the knowledge, to all the way distributed and having a holographic situation. You may ask how organizations locate or assess the knowledge domains based on these three dimensions. I mean, there are different tools and techniques. In the book chapter, you see a few ways, and here you can just practice with little examples. Imagine that you get this quotation said by one of the managers of KLM regarding the incident management. How would you then locate this knowledge domain on the quality spectrum? Pause and think, and then continue. Same question comes to the codification. Pause the video, read the phrase, and see where would you locate the incident management knowledge domain on this codification spectrum. And then comes to the distribution. And this is again another quotation from a manager in the organization talking about how is the distribution of the incident management. And you can map this knowledge domain on the spectrum of the distribution. So this is just an example that shows how from the discussions with the managers, doing interviews with them, you can get a feeling about the situation of the knowledge domains. But there is a question here. When we assess the situation of the any important knowledge domain, KSP suggests this three-dimensional perspective. And of course, each knowledge domain can be situated on one point in this area. But we have to make a distinction between two states. The current situation of the knowledge domain, what we call it as is, and the expected situation of the knowledge domain, that we call it to be. For instance, one knowledge domain might be low on the quality, number 2, low on the codification, number 2, and almost monopoly, number 1 on the distribution. But this is the current situation. The ideal situation might be, for instance, 4 on quality, 5 on the codification, and perhaps 3 on the distribution. And it's important that you kind of make a sense of what does it mean that a knowledge domain is at the moment in certain position in this space versus being in a different position in the future. And when it comes to this three-dimensional representation, it's slightly difficult to always go with the 3D representations if we have two-dimensional screens. So instead of having the third dimension, which is the distribution, as a three-dimensional dimension, we can put numbers on the dots. So basically, this means that 2 on the quality, 2 on the codification, and 1 on the distribution. 4 on the quality, 5 on the codification, and 3 on the distribution. Just another easier way to think about the mapping of the knowledge areas. And then we get to the last and the most important question and step of KSP, which is how we are going as an organization to move from the current situation of the knowledge domain to the expected, the ideal situation. Which path, which road should we take? And thinking about this three-dimensional space, you can move to the right, you can move upward, you can increase on the distribution, and you can combine different moves. And this is basically the whole discussion with the managers and the consultants to come up with the best road from the current situation to the expected one. Imagine that you get this quotation, which kind of suggests that for this knowledge domain, the first step is to increase the quality by sending the team of incident managers to a high quality training program. So you see, codification is not changed, distribution is still 1, and quality is increased to 4. And then maybe the next step would be to work on further codification and distribution. This is just one example to show you how different steps, different actions may be translated into different arrows, different paths in terms of the knowledge strategy trajectories. Here is a question. What if instead of the black path, the organization would take the red one? What does that mean? Think about that and see if you can be critical to this red path. For some reasons, this is not recommended. See why. And can you think about the situation that is represented by the blue arrow? That organizations reduce the quality of the knowledge domain that they have. So this was just an example to introduce you the knowledge strategy process. A few highlights about this technique and methods. So focusing on the important knowledge domains, connecting them to the strategic priorities of the organization, proper understanding the current situation of the organizations, which knowledge areas are important and how are they based on the quality, codification, and the distribution. Thinking clearly about the expected situation and be critical to that. Why do we need to get to the 5 on the quality or 4 on the codification or any other number? And also thinking about different roads, different paths, because not all the paths are effective and feasible for the organizations. And of course, this is not the end of the story. The next steps would be how can we implement each of the moves or arrows that are defined based on the knowledge strategy process. So I hope you already got a good feeling about this method. Make sure that you read the book chapter, and one of the questions that we would like to push you think about is what are the criticisms to knowledge strategy process as a technique? What are the limitations of this technique? Think about that, and we will have some discussion